Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Almighty Allah had Himself given this glad tidings to the promised Messiah alayhi salam, that I shall cause thy message to reach the corners of the earth. It was 1898 when this prophecy was revealed. There was hardly anyone who knew promised Messiah alayhi salam outside the subcontinent at that time. But Allah had His own plans. He would attract many humble souls who accepted the message of promised Messiah and carried it to different parts of the world. And Australia is one of those fortunate countries of the world where the message of the promised Messiah reached in his lifetime. And today, I will be talking about those early Ahmadis of Australia and their unconditional love and commitment to Islam Ahmadiyyat. Among them, I will first mention Hazrat Hassan Musa Khan Sahib. He was among those Afghan Muslim cameliers who arrived here in second half of 19th century. He was a renowned Afghan scholar and an expert of 5 different languages. Even in Australian literature, he is referred as a person of great intellect. Christine Stevens called him a well-educated, whereas James Jupp titled him as a highly educated Indian. On various occasions, Hazrat Hassan Musa Khan Sahib represented the Afghan Muslims including royal functions. Again, Christine Stevens wrote, he became spokesman for Western Australian Afghans, indeed at times for all the Afghans in Australia. Hazrat Hassan Musa Khan Sahib accepted Ahmadiyyat through his 2 brothers. Both were the companions of the promised Messiah alayhi salam. It was in September 1903 when Hassan Musa Khan Sahib wrote a letter to the promised Messiah for Bai'at, and in response, Hazrat Maulvi Abdul Karim Sahib Sialkoti Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu wrote to him on behalf of the promised Messiah that his Bai'at has been accepted. He was in Broken Hill, New South Wales at the time, and as you can see on the screen, his Bai'at number was 1556. So he was among first 2,000 people in the whole world who accepted Ahmadiyyat, and actually there are many more. Among many contributions of Hassan Musa Khan Sahib for Islam and Ahmadiyyat in Australia, one is the Perth Mosque. Again, I refer to the author of Tin Mosques and Ghan Towns, who writes, the promoters of the Perth Mosque were Afghans like Hassan Musa Khan, the learned secretary, and Faiz Muhammad. Hassan Musa Khan Sahib had an immense love and attachment for the Perth Mosque. He was also one of the people who laid the foundation stone of the mosque. He writes at one place that he served more than 20 years for that mosque, and he contributed more than 1,000 pounds for it. And can you imagine 1,000 pounds? Because his allowance was only 4 pounds at the time. And over 20 years, he gave over 1,000 pounds for that mosque. Hazrat Hassan Musa Khan Sahib also hold the honor of being the first Musi outside subcontinent. As soon as he received the book Al-Wasiyat, or the will from Qadian, he swiftly responded to the letter and expressed his feelings in the reply. He wrote, I submit that I have thoroughly read your blessed book, the will, which as a source of attaining guidance, I am sending my will after signing it. I hope that His Holiness will honor me with His acceptance. Inspired by this fact, Hazur Anwar Ayyadallahu Ta'ala bin Nasr Aziz specifically mentioned this honor during the first tour of Australia in 2006, and he wished that all chanda-paying members of Australia should join the blessed institution of Wasiyat. Hassan Musa Khan Sahib's Wasiyat number was 84. He would regularly send his chanda to the headquarters as well. When the scheme for raising funds for the construction of Fazal Mosque in London was launched, he promised to donate £5. He gave £4 for himself and £2 on behalf of the family. As I mentioned earlier, his total monthly allowance was only £4 at the time. Hassan Musa Khan Sahib always wanted to go back to India to see the promised Messiah alayhi salam, but he could not return until 1912. He visited Qadian twice and spent time in the company of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Awwal Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu. He wanted to call his wife and children back to India, but Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Awwal Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu said, "If you are feeling good, then you yourself should travel to Australia and it is better for you." Hazur ने फरमाया कि अगर आपकी सेहत अच्छी है तो आप वापस ऑस्ट्रेलिया चले जाएं, ये आपके लिए बेहतर है. And as per the directive of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Awwal, Hassan Musa Khan Sahib came back to Australia, and historical records tell us that he never went back to India afterwards. Hazrat Hassan Musa Khan Sahib assimilated high degree of obedience to Khilafat in his being. This became more prevalent in his actions. Upon his return to Australia, he started to discharge his duty and responsibility for the propagation of teachings of Islam Ahmadiyat. Maulana Dost Muhammad Shahid Sahib has called him an honorary missionary and also mentions that आपका तबलीग का जज्बा जुनून की हद तक पहुंचा हुआ था. And how did he do tabligh or pass the message of Islam Ahmadiyat? Let me give you a glimpse of his activities. He traveled across Australia. He would write letters to the members of parliament, governors, the royal family, ambassadors, and to people from all walks of life. He would greet them and then introduce them to the Islam Ahmadiyat. He would also send them booklets and books providing information on the community. The scope of propagation of Islam Ahmadiyat carried out by Hazrat Hassan Musa Khan Sahib was not only limited to the common people, but rather his work were extensive and far-reaching. He wrote hundreds of letters, tracts, and booklets every year and distributed them. He had also been in regular contact with Ahmadis residing in Fiji and other neighboring islands, conveying them the true message of Islam. James Jupp, a British-Australian political scientist and author of Encyclopedia of Religions in Australia, he writes that Musa Khan took his Ahmadiyya missionary activities seriously. He distributed Ahmadiyya books to non-Muslims as well as donating them to Perth and Adelaide mosques.
नारा तकबीर, नारा तकबीर, इस्लाम अहमदियत, इस्लाम अहमदियत, असहाब अहमदिया, असहाब अहमदिया, नारा तकबीर.
Here on the screen you can see a small list of few articles that were published around that time in different newspapers. He was not only passing the message of Islam Ahmadiyat, but whenever and wherever it was needed, he was also defending Islam. Their incidents were either cartoons of the Holy Prophet ﷺ or objections on the Holy Quran were made. Hassan Musa Khan Sahib replied to all allegations with precise and irrefutable arguments that the historians, both Muslims and non-Muslims, applauded his endeavors in this regard. Mr. Bilal Cleland, a writer on history of Islam in Australia, he writes, over in Western Australia, Muhammad Hassan Musa Khan Sahib was still in action, defending Islam from attack. Mr. Bilal Cleland also acknowledged that Musa Khan Sahib was an Ahmadi. He writes that during this time Musa Khan himself have moved from mainstream Islam. Then he says, there is no evidence that this significance of sectarian development was understood at the time by the other Muslims. कैसी हैरत की बात है कि ये तो मानते हैं कि अहमदी ने इस्लाम का दिफा किया, लेकिन ये मानने के लिए तैयार नहीं कि वो अहमदी मुसलमान हैं. I'm sure Allah Almighty had also accepted the humble service of Hazrat Hassan Musa Khan Sahib Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, since he received this revelation that Khush Bash ke Akbat Niko Khahid should rejoice, desirable end is for those who are pious. Hazrat Hassan Musa Khan Sahib passed away on 18th of August 1945 after serving Ahmadiyat for 30 years in Australia and after 50 years of service of Islam. His grave is in Karakata Cemetery in Perth, Western Australia. Apart from Hassan Musa Khan Sahib, there are many names that we find in the history of Jamaat and in literature who lived in Australia, but we do not know much about them. One of them is Malik Muhammad Baksh Sahib of Lahore, who accepted Ahmadiyat in January 1904 at the hand of the promised Messiah alayhi salam. I found this letter that you can see on the screen in his Wasiyat records in Rabwa. And as you can see, he mentioned that मैंने हज़रत साहब के हाथ पर 1904 के आखिर पर बैत की थी. And he was also a Musi. His Wasiyat number was 458. He was a very close friend of Hassan Musa Khan Sahib. He passed away almost a year after on 24th January 1946, and he was also buried in Karakata Cemetery. The next one, the two other companions include Abdul Khalik Sahib and Ghulam Rasul Sahib. I came to know about both of them very recently when someone in Tarikh-e-Ahmadiyat section Pakistan shared their details with me. As you can see on the screen, Abdul Khalik Sahib was in Broken Hill and accepted Ahmadiyat around the same time as Hassan Musa Khan Sahib. And his bat number was 1621. So both of them, Hassan Musa Khan Sahib and Abdul Khalik Sahib, they did bat almost at the same time. Abdul Khalik Sahib died in Alice Spring and buried there. There is a street in Alice Spring which is called Khalik Street, which is named after him. His son, Ghulam Rasul, he was also a companion. He took bat, I think it's 1904, and his bat number was 2082. He went back to Pakistan in late 30s or 40s, and he passed away there in 1949. Dear audience, most of these early Ahmadis remained thousands and thousands of miles away from each other, without knowledge of each other's existence. But even after living almost half a century here in this country, they kept complete faith in the promised Messiah. And when they died, they left a mark on their gravestones mentioning their faith. It was the gravestones in Brisbane and Perth that were found where religion as Ahmadi Muslim or verse from Dur Samin was written. These gravestones make us believe that there were many more Ahmadis in Australia than what we know currently. Among them, one is Hazrat Ali Bahadur Khan Sahib Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, who was in Brisbane. You will be amazed at how Allah Almighty made all these arrangements to dig out this kind of information. Let me tell you a story. It was almost 20 years ago when one of our elder, late Abdul Latif Maqbool Sahib, who was father of Ataur Rahman Maqbool Sahib, he was visiting a Muslim section of a graveyard where he found two graves. One is of A.B. Khan and the other is Margaret Khan, with Ahmadi Muslim written on them. And then our research found out that Hazrat Ali Bahadur Khan Sahib indeed was a companion of the promised Messiah, and he was among those Ahmadis who came to Australia in start of 20th century or probably end of 19th century. He was born in Tatapani, which is now in Azad Kashmir, Pakistan, and accepted Ahmadiyat around 1898. When he used to work in Delhi, he migrated to Brisbane, Australia, and worked as a hawker and later had his own business. His services are also recorded in history of Ahmadiyat. Recently, we were able to have contact with his descendants, as you can see in this photo, and they have also visited our Masjid Batul Masroor. Our respected Murabbi Sahib, Ataya Rabbi Hadi Sahib, and Ibrahim Malik Sahib are also in contact with that family. Okay. While year 1903 is significant in the history of Ahmadiyat in Australia, when the message of the promised Messiah ﷺ reached here for the first time and Hazrat Hassan Musa Khan Sahib accepted it, there is another significance. If you ever go to the State Library of New South Wales here in Sydney, in its archive section you will find a journal, almost 120 years old. And in that journal, written with the lead pencil, an account of Mr. Charles Francis Sivright. He has written about his meeting with the promised Messiah ﷺ. And it reads that on the 22nd October 1903, I was in Qadian Township and met the Master Ghulam Ahmad. I was invited by two Ahmadis to go to Qadian and interview the promised Messiah Ghulam Ahmad. This duly took place and I was the guest of Ahmadiyya community there on and after the 22nd of October 1903. Mr. Sivright was born in Melbourne in 1862, converted to Islam in 1896 and changed his name to Muhammad Abdul Haq. He wanted to go to Egypt to learn more about Islam, but he had a vision. उन्हें रोया में ये दिखाया गया कि तुम्हारा गोहरे मकसूद उन पहाड़ों की तरफ मिलेगा जो हिंदुस्तान में काबुल और कश्मीर की तरफ हैं. He had a vision in which he was directed to go towards Kashmir. He visited India in 1903, and it was during this journey when he met the promised Messiah ﷺ in Qadian on 22nd of October and stayed there for 2 days. His detailed conversation with the promised Messiah is recorded in Malfuzat. He accepted Ahmadiyyat in 1906 while he was in New Zealand, and his announcement was published in Review of Religion. And the photo that you are seeing on this screen, I think that was a time in 1903 when he met promised Messiah ﷺ. Later, Later, he moved to USA and spent rest of his life there. In 1922, when he met Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib in USA, Sivright Sahib wrote an article in the Muslim Sunrise, and I present before you a few sentences. And I'll read in Urdu, the English is on the screen. He says, मेरे लिए अपनी ज़िंदगी में तमाम सफ़रों के दौरान पेश आने वाले मुख्तलिफ़ वाक़यात में से इससे हैरत अंगेज़ वाक़या नहीं गुज़रा जब मैं कादियान की बस्ती में उसके मसीह के सामने था, और आखिरकार जब मुझे उनके सामने पेश किया गया और हमारी आंखें मिली तो मुझे देखते ही वो जान गए कि मैं हक़ और सच्चाई का मुतलाशी हूँ, और उन्हें देखते ही मैं जान गया कि ये वही इलाही वजूद है जिसको इस ज़माना में मोमिनों को इकट्ठा करने और इस्लाम को दुनिया में फैलाने के लिए मबूस किया गया है. मुझे यकीन है कि इस मुलाकात का एहतमाम अल्लाह ताला ही ने मेरे लिए किया था, और वही है जिसने मेरे जिस्म में और मेरी रूह में हज़रत मसीह मौऊद अलैहिस्सलातु वस्सलाम की मोहब्बत डाली. On directive of our late Amir Mahmud Ahmad Shahid Sahib, I shared my research at the time, it was in 2013, I think, with respected Inamullah Kausar Sahib, who was missionary in USA at the time. He did his research and we found the grave of Sahib Sahib. And when Hazur came in 2013, I was fortunate enough to show my research to Hazur Anwar, and Hazur actually mentioned that he went to the graveyard for prayer, but the graveyard was closed at the time, so they couldn't go at the grave site of Sahib Sahib. The next Sahabi is Professor Clement Rake Sahib. Professor Rake was an Australian and Kiwi of a European background. He met the promised Messiah a few days before his demise. He actually met twice, once on 12th of May and second is 18th of May. Professor Rake was extremely intelligent, possessed extraordinary knowledge of different sciences. He traveled widely, giving lectures in London and India. He was a seeker of truth, and his research led him to the discovery of the promised Messiah ﷺ, and he later accepted Ahmadiyat. Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib Razillah Ta'ala Anhu has mentioned in his book Zikr Habib. During his tour to New Zealand in 2006, Hazur Anwar Ayyadallahu Ta'ala bin Nasir Aziz met his grandson and prayed at his gravesite. Another early Ahmadi in Australia was Muhammad Alam Kandhari Sahib of Adelaide. Muhammad Alam Sahib was the most famous Afghan of his generation to settle in Australia. His name is spelt as Muhammad Alam in Australian literature. He was a herbalist and philanthropist. Australians around the country, rich and poor, knew the name Muhammad Alam and his reputation for miracle cures. Muhammad Alam Sahib came to Australia in 1880s and worked in different trades, finally settling in Adelaide in 1928 at 181 Sturt Street, Adelaide. The most prominent aspect of his character was the service of humanity. Particularly during the Great Depression, he would provide food, clothing, and give cash to poor and needy. Christine Stevens writes that he became a household name in South Australia. He became यानी हर घर में जाने जाने वाला नाम बन गए. While Michael Sigler writes, he was a natural giver. He gave money to every charitable institution in Adelaide and to poor and unemployed people. And in the next slide, you can see a comment from the police commissioner of Adelaide in 1951, where he says, "Your good work is assisting those who are poor and needy and alleviating of the sick merits its very highest praise and commendation." A person, he writes after his son's recovery, that they have taught their son a prayer that he should recite every night before he going to sleep. And he says, God bless Muhammad Alam. चनाचे एक साहब ये लिखते हैं कि अपने बच्चे की शफा याबी के बाद हमने अपने बच्चे को एक दुआ सिखाई और उसे कहा कि हर रोज़ रात सोने से पहले ये दुआ करना नहीं भूलें, और दुआ ये थी कि God bless Muhammad Alam. Muhammad Alam Sahib passed away in 1964 at the age of 108. Thousands of people participated in his funeral, and it is recorded in history. Just imagine an Afghan, a Muslim, and there are thousands of people attending his funeral, and it is recorded in history that his funeral procession was 1.5 mile long. वो 1.5 मील लंबा उनका जनाजे का वो कतार थी जिसमें वो लोग शामिल हुए. His grave is located at Centennial Park Cemetery in Adelaide. Dear audience, these are just few Ahmadis that I have discussed before you. It seems there were many more Ahmadis in Australia. As you can see on screen, about the first Jalsa Salana, it was held in 1928, and also those Ahmadis contributed in Tahrik-e-Jadid when Hazur started it, paying 11 pounds and 10 shillings. And you will be also surprised to know that we had a formal Jamaat established in Adelaide. So all those people who are sitting here from Adelaide, they will be surprised by themselves that according to the historical records, as you can see, this is the annual report of Jamaat of 1917-1918, that Jamaat in Adelaide at the time. Hence, when we have Jamaat, obviously we will have opposition also. And my assumption grows stronger that we had many more members in Australia, because when I look at this newspaper, which was published in Brisbane in 1914, where an imam makes a statement in newspaper to ban Ahmadis from entering the Brisbane mosque or visiting other Muslim house. And it reads that public notices, Sayyid Jalal Shah hereby give notice to all Muslim members of Muhammadan mosque at Mount Gravett that you are not to give accommodation in the masjid or in your houses to the followers of the Qadian religion. If any member of the community persists in encouraging Qadian religion or its followers, I will call all Australian Muslims together and will put the offender or offenders out of the membership of Muhammadan by the government law. ये उस वक़्त भी करते थे और आज भी करते हैं, वही धमकी कि हम आपको इस्लाम से खारिज कर देंगे। और वो कौन होते हैं जो हमें इस्लाम से खारिज करने वाले? A few other Ahmadis in Australia, one in Tasmania, Mr. A. Fraser Hill, he took bath in 1914. Mr. Shadi Khan Sahib, he was here in Sydney, and his descendants are still in Sydney. Abdul Ghaffar Khan Sahib, he played an important role in getting the land of our Masjid Baitul Khuda. And there was also Khaja Amir Baksh, his family was in Perth. So these were the few of the Ahmadis in Australia at the time. Now I will read, just before I finish my speech, I will read the extract taken from the writings of the promised Messiah, and will say a few words in Urdu and conclude my speech. हज़रत मसीह मौऊद अलैहिस्सलाम फरमाते हैं कि जैसा कि अल्लाह ताला ने अपनी पाक पेशगोइयों में वादा फरमाया है कि वो इस ग्रोह को बहुत बढ़ाएगा और हज़ार सादिकीन को इसमें दाखिल करेगा, वो ख़ुद इसकी आपाशी करेगा और इसको नशो नुमा देगा, यहाँ तक कि उसकी कसरत और बरकत नज़रों में अजीब हो जाएगी, और वो उस चराग की तरह जो एक ऊंची जगह पर रखा जाता है, दुनिया की चारों तरफ अपनी रोशनी फैलाएंगे और इस्लामी बरक़ात के लिए बतौर नमूना ठहरेंगे। ऑस्ट्रेलिया में जमात अहमदिया की इब्तदाई तारीख़ ऐसे ही बुज़ुर्गों के इखलास, वफ़ा और कुर्बानियों का तज़किरा है। इस वसी बर-ए-आज़म में ये चंद इब्तदाई अहमदी हज़ारों मील के फ़ासला पर एक दूसरे से अलग थलग अपने अपने ईमानों की हिफाजत करते, अपने लबों और सीनों में हज़रत मसीह मौऊद अलैहिस्सलाम और उनके आका हज़रत मोहम्मद मुस्तफ़ा सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम का नाम लेते हुए इस दुनिया से रुखसत हो गए। उनमें से चंद एक के नाम तो हमें तारीख़ के सफ़ों पर मिलते हैं, और उनके नक्श और उनके निशान ढूंढते हुए बास ऐसे कतबे भी मिले जिनके नाम तारीख़ में तो नहीं मिलते, लेकिन उनकी कब्रों की पेशानी पर हज़रत मसीह मौऊद अलैहिस्सलाम की सदाकत और उन बुज़ुर्गों की मसीह मौऊद की मोहब्बत की दास्तान रकम है। मैं जब भी इनके बारे में पढ़ता हूँ तो हैरान होता हूँ कि चंद साल कबल तो हमें इनमें से बाज़ के हालात का बिल्कुल इल्म नहीं था। यहाँ देखें, इस तस्वीर में वो जगह है जहाँ हज़रत हसन मूसा खान साहिब और मलिक मोहम्मद बख्श साहिब की कब्र की जगह है, और इनका हमें कुछ साल कबल बिल्कुल इल्म नहीं था। लेकिन अल्लाह ताला ने ये चाहा कि इनके इखलास और वफ़ा के बारे में हमें इल्म हो, बस अल्लाह ताला ने ख़ुद ही उसके सामान पैदा कर दिए, और आज जब भी हम इनका नाम लेते हैं तो रज़ी अल्लाह ताला अन्हुम कहते हैं और दुआ करते हैं कि अल्लाह ताला इनसे राज़ी हो। अल्लाह ताला इन सब बुज़ुर्गों से मग़फ़िरत का सलूक करे, उन्हें अपने कुर्ब में जगह दे, और इस्लाम अहमदियत का वो पौधा जो उन्होंने इस वसी बर-ए-आज़म में लगाया था, हम उसकी हिफाजत करने वाले हों, और इसके शीरीं फल यानी हज़रत मसीह मौऊद अलैहिस्सलाम और उनके आका व मौला हज़रत मोहम्मद मुस्तफ़ा सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के पैगाम को इस बर-ए-आज़म के कोने कोने में पहुँचाने वाले हों। आमीन, अल्लाहुम्मा आमीन।